So it is Anzac Day tomorrow, and a day that's really, really important in the calendar for our public holidays in New Zealand. It is a day very much, I think it's become almost our national day in many ways, different to Waitangi Day, of course. There'll always be an element of protest, and as there probably should be, but the Anzac Day is different. It's more sombre, and it's important that we don't forget it. And that's about bringing through the next generation and, of course, celebrating it in all corners of New Zealand, which we do, of course, through our RSAs. And one of those places is the small RSA in the beautiful Hokianga harbourside, would you call it a town? Little place, Opononi, and one of the local RSA members there. Good mate of mine, Len Naera, who joins us now. Lenny, g'day, mate. Nice to have you on.
Morning, Duncan. How you doing?
Not too bad. And how's all the prep going? You guys full tip?
Yeah, absolutely. All the food's been being prepared and getting ready for about 3 different places where we provide food through 3 different services that we have through our RSA throughout the morning and the afternoon.
So you've got 3. I mean, how many volunteers have you got there? Because you're one of the smaller ones, but boy, you guys work really hard. And so, how many volunteers have you got? Without the volunteers, it wouldn't happen, right?
Yeah, our RSA is very, very small. It has no permanent paid staff. The whole RSA has always been a volunteer RSA. Hence why we still exist, and some of the big RSAs that we know of have failed in the past. So we've got in our RSA, everyone's a volunteer and everyone prepares for whatever event's coming up. We had a bit of a working bee yesterday morning at our RSA getting prepared for tomorrow's event.
And that's all part of it, Len. I mean, that's all part of it, sort of scrubbing it and getting it all, shiny and ready for what is really, the big show, the big morning, the big day. You were a serviceman, you were in the Air Force, so I mean, this is sort of, it has extra meaning probably for someone like you because you've sat alongside these guys. You've been in the forces, right?
Yeah, mate. Like our little wee RSA, we have a memorial wall with all of our tupuna that have been away and served, and it's not just World War One and World War Two. We've got people that have served in conflicts. From quite later day conflicts. So it's not just about World War One and then later World War Two, and then we went to Korea, then we went to Vietnam. And then in all the more modern, through Afghanistan and Iraq, and where we've had people serve there and die. So it's not just the idea that RSAs are just for veterans from World War One and then later World War Two. That's a myth.
Yeah, well, I spoke to Rhys Jones this morning. He's the national chairman of the RSA, of the board, and he said to me, confirmed to me, that there's no longer any World War One or World War Two vets left in New Zealand, and so nowadays the vets are represented by the more modern conflicts that we all know and have opinions on, like the Vietnams, Afghanistan, East Timor. There's different services that we different service that is completed overseas. So in many ways, these are now these conflicts that are really quite remembered by New Zealanders. They weren't that long ago.
Yeah, well, my grandmother used to say that she was the luckiest woman in a little wee place just outside of Opononi called Waimamaku. She sent 5 sons away to different conflicts, and all 5 sons came home. So she always said that she was the luckiest woman there. In our little wee RSA, we've got a photo board of all past servicemen from our area. And then one day, I expect my photo to be hanging up on there, and my son's photo to be hanging up in there. He's a ex-sailor in the New Zealand Navy, Royal New Zealand Navy, and so it has a lot of meaning for me and my family specifically, because my family's littered with service personnel throughout the time. So these days, Anzac Day, we always say at the end of our ode, we say, lest we forget, and more people are actually knowing the stories, and you see the horrors of war, and we never ever want that to happen again. So,
No.
a lot of younger people these days are actually tuning up to Anzac parades with a lot more knowledge now, and they understand the meaning of it a lot more than probably in the last 20 years.
Yeah, I agree with you, Ed. The other thing I like about it too, which is not always the case in other national days, but it brings us all together no matter who we are, where we've come from, whether which canoe we arrived on, and what date we arrived on, or which year we arrived in Māori Pākehā, whatever we are. It brings us all together under the one flag, one people. We've got our differences, but boy, it brings us together into that RSA afterwards for a beer or whatever, and we're New Zealanders, and I think that's, for me, it's a good feeling,
Yeah, mate. We always get a lot of representation from, say from young cadets. They'll come out, and then as you said, back at the RSA, we've got sort of three different venues. We start with a dawn parade at a little wee village just out of Opononi called Whirinaki. And then we go back to a marae there for breakfast that our RSA puts on. And then at 9 o'clock, there's another little service at a urupa in a little community called Awane. And then after that, we have a civic service here in Opononi, and then back to the main sort of gathering at our little wee RSA, where we put on a feed for everybody around there. And then you hear these, there's still people, and there's some really good stories to be told. And that's the really good thing about Anzac Day, where general people, they don't really get to hear stories from. As I said, there's no more World War I and World War II vets, but there are vets, and there are stories, and stories that have been handed down to different family members. And those stories need to be retold, and that's a really good thing about Anzac Day.
Yeah, no, I love those stories. No, well said, Lenny. Hey, nice to have a chat, mate. Nice to catch up, and we'll do so again shortly, no doubt. Anyway, but yeah, good to hear your voice, mate, and good to hear those stories as well. That's Len Naera, who's a member at the RSA in the Opononi, which is in the Hokianga, and also a former serviceman as well, and one of life's excellent guys, great guys, and a mate of mine.